Recorded at an undisclosed location known only as the Homestead, you've tuned into Ever Vigilant. Our mission? To encourage and challenge men to prepare, defend, and lead at home and in their communities.
Only those who risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go. T.S. Eliot. In September 1903, a national conference of Unitarian churches was held in Atlantic City, New Jersey. A speaker named Reverend Fred V. Holly said the following: "In the minute that is left, let me say that what we need most on those great western prairies is not primarily more money, more meeting houses, but a love and a fidelity enthusiastic enough to find a way or make one. Men who are not hunting for a place or a pulpit, but who in a splendid enthusiasm can sing. I need not follow the beaten path. I do not hunt for any path. I will go where there is no path and leave a trail." Like many others, and perhaps like you, I had come to the edge of a cliff in my life. I had reached my career goals, had a wonderful wife, 2 healthy children. Anyone looking in from the outside would think that things were going well. And if you were happy with the status quo, things were great. I worked hard Monday through Friday, built a solid reputation and network in my industry. I played hard, video games that is, Friday nights into Saturday morning. Saturday was family time. Again, Saturday night into Sunday morning, I'd be playing video games. Sunday morning was church. Sunday afternoon, family time. Rinse and repeat, week after week. When I say that I played video games, the games were less of an escape and really an ongoing project to wrap up completed games and projects. One year I racked up around 30 completed games, finishing up the last one just minutes before midnight on New Year's Eve. This was the same year I had purchased a PlayStation for their exclusive titles because there just weren't any more Xbox 360 games left to play. At some point in this rinse and repeat cycle, I started to question, is this it? Is this really all that I can do? Is this really my purpose? My first reaction to this question was yes. I'd hiked to the end of the trail and was standing at the edge of a cliff with seemingly nowhere to go. In an effort to get myself unstuck, I looked to a higher power and began to pray for wisdom, as is recommended in my favorite book of the Bible, James. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. James 1:5, NIV. As I prayed for wisdom and discernment, I started to look at things a little bit differently. As I began to look at things differently, I noticed that the edge of the cliff was not the end of the trail. That when the fog lifted, there was a small trail that continued on, a narrow, steep, dangerous trail that only those committed to doing things differently would be willing to embark on. Once I noticed that small trail, I decided that I would start a new adventure, a new life. I decided fearlessly to move forward and to challenge myself and get outside of my comfort zone. I decided that I was going to move forward and challenge myself, that I needed to make the best use of my time. This included my commute time. I started listening to podcasts, audiobooks instead of music and sports talk. I remember being blown away by the classic book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I started getting up earlier and using that time to read the Bible, pray, exercise, and journal. Rather than watching TV in the evenings, I was doing online courses and reading books. I started to excel at work, and although she missed my company in the evenings watching TV, my wife quickly realized that I was becoming a different man. A better father and husband. One that was taking his roles and responsibilities as a husband and a father seriously by leading those most important to me. One morning as I was praying and meditating, I realized a big part of why I was changing and embracing these new challenges was because I had opened my mind to new thoughts and possibilities that I hadn't reached the end of the trail. As I began to think about what the word open meant, I realized that it wasn't just my mind that needed to be open, but also my eyes, my ears, my mouth, my heart, and my arms. These 6 principles became a prayer, but also a guidepost in my life as who I wanted to become. As these 6 principles played in my head and I began to flush them out in meaning and context, I wanted to share them. I wanted others to hear these principles so that they too could use them as a guide down that narrow, steep, and dangerous trail. My first thought was to write a book, but I felt that there was no possible way that I could. I lacked the confidence in myself that only comes with taking risks and seeing even a bit of success. My next idea was a podcast. I had recently started listening to podcasts and felt that would be something that even an introvert like myself could do. I only planned on doing a total of 8 episodes. An intro, an episode on each of the principles to break them down thoroughly, and a final review episode. I thought that I could just toss out those 8 episodes and move on. I'm now over 190 episodes into Ever Vigilant podcast experience. And when that part of the journey down this trail began, I could have never imagined the friends that I would make, including some podcasters I listen to regularly, or amazing guys that I've had the opportunity to interview, from Navy SEALs to authors, speakers, fellow podcasters, entrepreneurs, preachers, first responders, security experts, or the opportunities that I have had to be a guest on other podcasts to share my thoughts has been an amazing experience. The flip side is that I've also grown. I've become a better speaker. I've become more clear in my own thoughts and how to express them. I've had to get out of my comfort zone as an introvert and do interviews, request interviews, and learn to also deal with the rejection and failure. Although my podcast is not popular and may never be listed in any top 5 list, it has been worth the effort, the late nights, the editing fiascos that I have dealt with. But here I am, embarking on a new challenge. Well, many years ago, I didn't have the confidence to write a book. You hold the evidence in your hand of the fact that I am indeed a new man, ever looking for the next challenge, and finally ready to put out a book on the 6 principles of open. So that, my friends, is the intro to the book I'm working on right now. I wanted to share that for 2 reasons. Number one, for there are certain guys out there that is going to resonate with, that have reached the end of their cliff and they don't know where to go. They want to move further forward. They just don't know how to start. So maybe for some guys out there, seeing that I have been there myself, this will resonate with them. The other reason for this, and I'm crazy like this, is to put this out there to hold myself accountable. I don't want this book project to be a book project that I talk about and refer to for the next 3 or 4 years. This is something that I'm working on, something that I need to be actively moving forward and getting done and getting out there. My name is Joe Prim, and you have tuned into Ever Vigilant Podcast. If this is your first time listening, I hope that you enjoy the podcast. If you've been listening for a long time, thanks. I do very much appreciate you listening to this podcast. If you've been listening for a while, I would really appreciate it if you would share this with your friends, with your family, anybody that you think that this podcast could help out. Subscribe, review this podcast. That is why I am doing this podcast. That is why I take the time out to do this is to encourage and challenge men, as it says in the intro, to prepare, defend, and lead. So I never really want this podcast to turn into a Bible study. There are a lot of good podcasts out there that have that covered, and there are a lot of cheesy podcasts out there that kind of got that covered. I am a follower of Christ. I am a Christian. And because of that, that changes the way that I look at pretty much everything in my life. My goal in the way that I live my life is that Christianity would not just be something that comes out of my mouth when it fits my purpose, but that it would be how I live out every single day. That Christianity would be infused inside of every sinew of my being. That the way I react to people in traffic, the way I react and return emails, the way I speak on the phone, the way I interact with my wife, the way that I try to raise up my children, the way that I take care of and maintain the things that I have been given, that all of those would be a reflection of who I am as a follower of Christ. So in my podcast, I don't always feel the need to refer everything back to the Bible or to Christ, because that's already for me a given in everything that I do, in everything that I am trying to accomplish. But the reality is, in an episode like this one here that we're about to embark on, when I'm thinking through things and ways that we need to change, or things that are important into our lives as men, I often refer back to the Bible. Heroes of the Bible, men of the Bible, because I have learned about them and studied them for most of my life. But the reality is, I think that there is a lot to learn there. So I refer back to that stuff. My goal here with this podcast is to challenge you to think differently than maybe the way that you've always been thinking. To question things, to start to ask why. That is my motivation. These guys that I'm going to mention in this episode, go to the Bible. Read about them. Learn for yourself. Take what you can from these stories. The Christian church has started to just be a rinse and repeat. We say the same stories about David. We say the same stories about this guy. We say the same stories about that guy. There is a lot more there. So if you're a Christian, and I know that's the bulk of the guys that listen to my podcast fall into that category, then we serve a God of purpose, discipline, and standards. Now, what does that mean? Let's break it down. I'm going to use 3 different guys from the Bible to kind of separate out what I mean by purpose, by discipline, and by standards. So there are a lot of guys that I could have chosen in the Bible to talk about purpose. But I don't think that there is a better example than Paul of purpose. You see, Paul was tenacious. He was as true as you could possibly be to a purpose. Before he had his little meet-up with Jesus, where he was confronted face to face with Jesus, he hated the Christians. His purpose was to destroy Christianity, and he did everything in his power to be throwing Christian men and women into jail, watching them be stoned. And that was his purpose. And he wasn't 85% committed to that purpose. He wasn't 90% committed to that purpose. He was 100% committed to the purpose of seeing the demise of Christianity. And then, what happened? He had a little altercation with Jesus. Little altercation where Jesus said to him, "Why are you persecuting me?" And boom, light bulb went on. Paul had to rethink everything that he had learned his entire life of what Christianity and what the teachings that he had learned and flushed out as a rabbi really meant. And when he realized what was going on and what he was doing, he flipped it around 180 degrees. But as a Christian then, as a follower of Christ, he was again 100% committed. Now, he was the one spending time in jail. He was the one getting flogged. He was the one getting shipwrecked. He was the one fighting off robbers. He was the one facing the persecution. And even facing that persecution, he proceeded forward because he knew his purpose. We often talk about getting up after failure or life knocking you down. This guy got knocked down and beat up time after time after time. Time in prison, shipwrecks, difficulties followed him. Yet he stayed consistent and true to his purpose. Then let's jump into discipline. David, to me, epitomizes discipline. Yes, he failed with Bathsheba. But we all fail. We're all going to make mistakes. But David had been told that he was going to be the king of Israel. He had been anointed as to be the next king of Israel. And now, the guy who was king then, at that time, Saul, was not happy at all with that. So he followed David around trying to kill him for a long period of time, doing everything he could to catch up to David and kill him. And David had many opportunities to take Saul's life. But his answer was always, it is not the right time. To the point where one time, Saul was so close behind David and his men that Saul went to sleep in a cave that David was actually in. That's how close Saul was to catching and capturing David. So as Saul enters this cave with his army outside, Saul enters this cave to go to sleep at night, David goes back into the shadows to hide. And as Saul falls asleep, he goes up to him and has every opportunity. This man has been giving him troubles for years. He has already been anointed to be the next king of Israel. He's a hero to many people. But because of the discipline, he says now is not the time. So he cuts off a corner of Saul's robe to prove that he was there and had the opportunity to kill Saul and didn't do it. That's discipline. And then I got a couple of characters that I think we'll talk about a little bit more in an upcoming episode. But that's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And those guys, to me, represent standards. Because those guys, they got captured by the Babylonians and King Nebuchadnezzar. And he picked out, kind of plucked out of all of these men of Israel, of people of the court and stuff, the men that were the best of the best. Maybe the best physical specimens, maybe the smartest, the brightest. So these three guys end up getting picked out and selected for a select group of men that are going to serve in the court of King Nebuchadnezzar. But these men had high standards. They started to be the best, the top of these top men. They stood out. In fact, they stood out enough and had enough balls to audaciously ask that they could change the diet that they were being fed to a diet that went along better with their religious beliefs. Gutsy move. But because they stood out so much, they held themselves to such a high standard that when they did this, the answer was sure. Let's do an experiment. You eat your diet. Prove to us that your diet of what you think is better to eat according to your religion is good, and you can go ahead and do it. And they proved themselves with that diet. But they also held themselves to a standard a little bit later in the story. And that was a standard of not bowing to an idol, which would have kept them out of the fiery furnace, right? That we heard about in Sunday school. They got thrown into that fiery furnace, was cranked up 7 times the normal heat, but they survived. And they survived because, I believe, they held themselves to a higher standard. So how do we combine these 3 things? Our purpose, discipline, and standards to become the men that we not only want to be, but really need to be. This world right now is filled with a lot of chaos, a lot of fear. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow or next week because of this COVID-19. This coronavirus has instilled fear amongst a tremendously huge number of people. And fear consumes people. This is probably what I'll do the podcast on next week, is fear. I'm reading a great book right now called Fear is Fuel. Go get that book. It will blow your mind. It will revolutionize the way that you see and think about fear. There's a little hocus pocus in there, but for the most part, it is a fantastic book that will be an asset to you. So how do we do this? How do we rise above everybody else to be the leader that people need right now? We're not in a time like we were 6 months ago. It's a new paradigm, a new time. It's time for leaders to rise, and you were one of them. So how do we pull these 3 things together? How do we combine these 3 things? And I think really all 3 of these things hinge on one of them, and that's purpose. You need to know your purpose. Well, what does that mean? I see a lot of men out there have no idea, think their purpose is to go to work every day. Think their purpose is to show up at church each Sunday. Think their purpose is to take their daughter to the softball game. Think their purpose is to shuttle their son to karate practice. There's something bigger out there for you. There's something important out there for you to do besides shuttle people around. There are conversations that need to be had. There are people that need to be led. There are people out there that need their fear eased. So how do you do that? How do you become what we all are striving to be or want to be or dream about being, right? Ever since we were a kid and we were watching Davy Crockett and Daniel Boone and thinking, wow, these guys are courageous heroes. They don't have fear. They're people that other people want to follow. They had purpose. They had purpose in where they were going and what they were doing. One of the scariest things for men to do is spend time with themselves, reflecting on their life and looking at and being honest with themselves about what they can and need to be. So understanding a clear purpose is not for the faint of heart. If you're a follower of our Christ, if you're a Christian, then our number one purpose has got to be the Great Commission, right? In exemplifying Christ in everything that we do, everything that we say, how we spend our money, how we maintain our vehicles even, right? That should be reflected in every single thing that we do. How we talk to our kids, what we show them is important, right? Not what we tell them is important, but what we show them is important. Maybe for some of you, you think your purpose is to be the best dad you can, the best husband you can, the best employee you can. I think those probably fall into that at some place. But your purpose has got to be bigger. Now, if you're a Christian, your purpose should be bigger, right? That's a lifelong commitment to a cause, to a purpose. But a lot of times we don't talk about it that way. We don't look at it that way. We're not taught that it's that way. We start to get it in our mind that it's a Sunday thing or it's a 15-minute devotion each day in a 5-minute prayer. It's got to be something more. And on top of that, there's something for you to do. Not just show up to church on Sunday, not just give your 10%, not just show up on Wednesday nights to bring your kid to Wednesday night children's church. You have a bigger purpose to serve. There are needs, there are voids that only you can fill. So how do you find your purpose? What do you do? You need to take some time out by yourself. Quiet time. Find some place. Yes, you might have to stop someplace on your way home from work. And you won't get dinner on time. Or you may need to leave the house early on a Saturday morning. Have some solo time to flush some things out. And your wife might not be happy because certain things didn't get done. Your kids might be disappointed because they wanted to go fishing with you. You know what? You need this time. If you're a Christian, pray during that time. Bring a pen and notepad. Take some notes. Think about what it is that drives you. What it is that pushes you forward. What it is that you think that you can do or be better at. Because the moment that you know what your purpose is the moment discipline gets easier. If you know what your purpose is and that purpose drives your day, drives what you are doing, then getting up earlier in the morning to read the Bible pray, and journal is not going to be so difficult. If, like for me, a big part of my purpose, a big part of what I'm doing is this podcast and everything else that goes along and possibly comes forward in the future with Ever Vigilant, that's got to drive me to get up in the morning. That's got to drive me to pray. That's got to drive me to communicate with other men, to encourage other men, to challenge other men, to prepare, defend, and lead. That purpose, that mission was tattooed on my heart to do this. I am as introverted a person as you will find. But yet I record this podcast. For me, no. For you. As you find your purpose, holding yourself to a higher standard becomes easier as well. Because once you go down a road of having a purpose, having a direction, it builds confidence. In confidence in who you are and what you are doing helps hold you to yourself to a higher standard. Because number one, you have a lot to lose once you realize that you have a purpose. You're not just a chauffeur and your boss is, you know what? That you have a purpose bigger than yourself to serve. You better hold yourself to a standard so that what you are doing doesn't come crumbling down. That what you're putting your time and effort and energy into doesn't crash down and corrode. So you hold yourself to a different standard. Use discipline, you keep your ego in check. You know, holding yourself to a different standard for me even comes to the point of how I respond to an email. You know, I get emails from time to time where my knee-jerk response to that email is, what the fun is wrong with this guy? Right? I'm amped up. It's personal. Why would this person respond that way? Why are they constantly confrontational with me? And then I have to lean back. And then I have to self-evaluate and say, is it him? Is it me? Even if it's him, my reaction is under my control. Okay, boom, ego in check. I'm not going to take this personal. Even if this guy is intentionally trying to egg me on and see where this can go, I'll have to disappoint him, right? I'm going to hold myself to a higher standard. I'm going to respond to his email in a nice way. No. Check that. I hold myself to a higher standard. I'm going to respond to that email as classy and as clear and as concise and as best as I can so that no one walks away frustrated. No one walks away misunderstanding. I will do my best to hold myself to a higher standard in even how I respond to this email. So I think these three things are of the utmost importance and are three things that are lacking in our lives. Three things that we don't talk about from the pulpit, we don't talk about in our schools, and we don't hear enough about from our fathers, from our friends, from our grandfathers, from our godfathers. This stuff should be being pounded into our brain as young men. What is your purpose? Being the importance of discipline and holding yourself to a higher standard. Because when you hold yourself to a higher standard, it doesn't matter what everybody else is doing. You have a reason why you don't do it that way. So if we find our purpose, if we dig deep, if we take the time to think things through, to get away from the constant entertainment, the constant beeping phones, and the constant attention that people are trying to seek from us, when we get away from that, get some quiet time, preferably out in nature, right? Someplace safe where you can close your eyes. You can pray. Maybe open your Bible. Have a notebook. Have a pen. And just start to realize who you are, what made you who you are, and what, because of the path that you've been down, you can share with others. There are good men out there that I know that are leading Celebrate recovery groups, because that has been something in their life, in their past. So they're leading these groups and helping men and women realize that they can get out of that hole that they're in. And that becomes a part of their purpose. Helping others. Challenging others. And it's amazing to see. So that's my challenge to you. Get out there. Take some time. Not one 15-minute time. Spend some time really understanding what your purpose is. Because once you know what your purpose is, it will help you be more disciplined. It will help you hold yourself to a higher standard, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and so many others like Bonhoeffer and other greats, other giants of this faith whose shoes we will never fit in. So I'm going to go through the quick ending here. But if you're listening to this podcast here at the end of April 20th, or during that week, stay tuned. I got a special announcement at the end of this episode. But otherwise, if you would like to help this mission move forward, if you think that it is a good cause and something that we need to do is challenge and encourage men to prepare, defend, and lead, and understand what their roles and responsibilities are, help me out. Go to patreon.com/evervigilant and join the Wolf Pack. I'm building a small band of men there that are supporting this podcast, supporting a missionary down in Guatemala that I have personally spent time with, and reminding me when I don't feel like doing the podcast, when I don't feel like moving forward with this mission, when I don't feel like anything is coming of this, that there is a group of men out there that are willing to put their hard-earned money into the coffers of Ever Vigilant. I appreciate you members of the Wolf Pack. Some of you guys have been a part of this for a very long time. Big thank you to you guys. Some new people joined up last week. Thank you. It means a lot. It's humbling. It means a lot to me. It is a huge reminder that this mission is important. Again, stick around if you want to hear this ending announcement. Otherwise, hold fast and God bless. Some of you guys that listen to this podcast that are members of the Wolf Pack or follow me on Instagram at the Ever Vigilant know that I started the the hashtag 75 hard challenge. Here's what I like about this challenge. This challenge is both a mental and a physical challenge because it's for 75 days. You get to define your diet and you get to define your exercise program. Here are the simple rules to this challenge. Follow a diet. It can be a diet of your choice, but it must be a structured plan designed with physical improvement in mind. You must complete 2 45-minute workouts. One of these workouts must be outdoors. Absolutely no alcohol or cheat meals. Take a progress picture every day. Drink 1 gallon of water and read 10 pages of a book. Audiobooks do not count. If you fail, you must start over on day 1. So I have been doing this challenge now for 4 days. It started last Wednesday. It has been a ball buster. I am more sore than I've probably ever been. But with a user-defined exercise program, you can make it cater where you're at in your life. So like for me today, being pretty beat up from these first few days, a day of stretching for my first 45 minutes, and I went on a 5-mile, hour-and-a-half walk for my second workout with my daughter. Again, this is time that I would not have spent an hour and a half with just me and my daughter had it not been for this. So there are ways to incorporate in your family into what you're doing as well. But you can use your imagination on how to structure this best for you. The reason I'm making this announcement is really not because of me at the end of this episode. It's because I started a little group on Instagram of other men that wanted to join up with this challenge, 75 hard challenge. So if you go to Instagram and go to follow me at The Ever Vigilant on Instagram, direct message me, tell me you want to join the challenge and would like to join the group, and I'll bring you into our small group that we have of guys that are working on this challenge. The purpose of the group, we check in once, twice a day, let everybody know where we're at, encourage one another, but it also gives you a bit of accountability because there's another group of men out there, all guys all over the world, that want you to succeed, that want you to make it through these 75 days of mental and physical difficulty. It's a good challenge. It can be catered and manipulated as the 75 days goes on. But so far, it has gone good for me. I am excited to be doing something like this. I needed a challenge. I needed a boost. I needed something that was going to challenge me and bring me to a little bit different level. So if you'd like to join, again, follow me on Instagram at The Ever Vigilant. Shoot me a DM that you want to do the 75 hard challenge and you want to be in the group. I'll knock you into that group, and we would love to have you there to be a part of what we're doing, encouraging and challenging one another as we move through this 75 hard challenge. Thanks, guys. Hold fast. God bless.
For the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack.